pack your things and get out. You're fired.
Ethan Cole had always been invisible on purpose. For 9 years, he worked at Apex Industries as a senior operations manager. He was the man who fixed problems before they became disasters, the man who stayed late so others could go home early, the man who never asked for credit. Most people in the building only knew him as Emma's dad, the quiet single father who brought his little girl to the office on school holidays and kept snacks in his desk drawer for her. Emma was 7. She had her mother's eyes and her father's calm nature. After Ethan's wife died of cancer 3 years earlier, the two of them had become a team. Every decision Ethan made, every extra hour he worked, every dollar he saved was for her. That Monday morning felt ordinary until it wasn't. The email came at 9:14 a.m. Mandatory meeting, conference room A, 9:30 a.m. All department staff required. Ethan sighed, closed his laptop, and looked at Emma coloring quietly at the small table in the corner of his office. "Come on, princess. We have to go sit in a meeting for a little while." Emma packed her crayons carefully and took his hand. The conference room was already full when they arrived. Ethan found 2 seats near the back. Emma sat beside him, legs swinging, and opened her coloring book again. At exactly 9:30, the new CEO, Richard Hale, walked in. He was 34, expensive suit, perfect hair, and the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He had taken over the company only 3 months earlier after his father retired. Since then, he had fired 14 people. Everyone was nervous. Richard stood at the front, hands in his pockets, and looked around the room slowly until his eyes stopped on Ethan. "Ethan Cole," he said, almost cheerfully. "Front and center, please." Ethan felt Emma's small hand tighten around his fingers. He stood up and walked to the open space in front of the long table. Emma followed and stood half-hidden behind his leg. Richard smiled wider. "You've been with Apex for 9 years. That's a long time. But this company is moving in a new direction. We need people who are hungry, not people who are comfortable. Effective immediately, your position is terminated." The room went completely silent. Emma's voice was tiny. "Daddy," Ethan kept his face calm. "May I ask the reason, sir?" Richard shrugged. "Restructuring, that's all the reason you need. Security will help you collect your things, and please take your daughter with you. This is a place of business, not a daycare." A few people looked down at their notebooks. 1 or 2 smirked. No one spoke. Ethan nodded once. He turned, took Emma's hand, and walked out of the room with every pair of eyes on his back. In his office, he packed a cardboard box in silence. Emma stood beside the desk, eyes filling with tears. "Why is that man so mean to you, Daddy?" Ethan knelt down and wiped her cheek with his thumb. "Some people are mean when they're scared, baby. It's not about us. We're going to be okay." When they walked out through the glass lobby, Richard was standing near the doors with his arms crossed, watching them leave like he had just won a game. That night, Emma cried herself to sleep in Ethan's bed. He held her until her breathing finally slowed, then sat in the dark living room staring at the wall. He made a promise out loud to the empty room. 30 days. What nobody at Apex knew, not Richard, not the board, not even Ethan's closest co-workers, was the real reason the company still existed. 3 years earlier, Apex had been 90 days away from bankruptcy. Richard's father, the old CEO, had secretly sold 60% of the company's shares to a private investor to keep the doors open and protect hundreds of jobs. The investor had only one condition: his identity must remain completely hidden. He wanted no seat on the board, no special treatment, no public recognition. That investor was Ethan Cole. He had used every cent of his late wife's life insurance, his own savings, and a loan against their small house to buy those shares. He never told anyone because he wanted Emma to grow up normal. He wanted to keep coming to work every day like any other father. The morning after he was fired, Ethan made 3 phone calls. The first was to the law firm that had handled the original share purchase. The second was to the private bank that held the documents. The third was to an old friend who sat on the board and had always suspected the truth. Within 48 hours, the machinery started moving. Quietly, efficiently. Legally, Ethan spent the next weeks working from the small kitchen table after Emma went to bed. He reviewed every document, signed every paper, and prepared every statement. He barely slept. Emma noticed. "Daddy, you look tired," she said one night while brushing her teeth. He kissed the top of her head. "I'm fixing something important, princess. Just a few more days." The 30th day, everything was ready. Exactly 30 days after he had been fired, Ethan walked back into Apex Industries at 10:00 a.m. This time, he wore a dark charcoal suit. Emma walked beside him in a pale yellow dress, her hair in a neat ponytail, holding his hand like she always did. The receptionist's eyes went wide. She reached for the phone, but Ethan simply said, "They're expecting us in conference room A." The same room was full again. Richard stood at the head of the table, laughing with two of his new executives. The laughter died the moment the door opened. Ethan stepped inside. Emma stayed close to his side. Richard's face went from confusion to anger in 2 seconds. "What do you think you're doing here?" "Security." Ethan walked to the table, placed a thick black folder down, and opened it. "I'm not here as an employee, Richard. I'm here as the majority shareholder of Apex Industries. As of 8:47 this morning, I own 60.3% of this company." Silence that followed was heavier than the day he had been fired. Richard laughed once sharply. "That's impossible. My family owns this company." Ethan slid the notarized documents across the table one by one. "Your father sold these shares 3 years ago when the company was about to collapse. I bought them with my wife's life insurance so this place wouldn't die and hundreds of people wouldn't lose their jobs. I kept it secret because I wanted a normal life for my daughter. You fired me in front of her. You called her a disruption. You made her cry. That was the moment you lost the right to lead this company." Looked around the table slowly, meeting every pair of eyes that had stayed silent 30 days earlier. Effective immediately, Richard Hale is removed as CEO. An emergency board meeting will begin in 1 hour. My first official decision will be to reinstate every employee fired without proper cause in the last 3 months with full back pay. Emma tugged on his jacket and whispered, loud enough for the whole room to hear, "Daddy, does the mean man have to leave now?" Ethan picked her up into his arms so she could see everyone. "Yes, baby, he does." Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish. The same security guards who had escorted Ethan out a month ago now stood waiting behind Richard's chair. As they led him out of the building, Ethan stayed in the conference room with Emma still in his arms. Several board members stood and shook his hand. A few looked ashamed. One older woman had tears in her eyes. That evening, the story broke across every business news site and social media platform. Single father fired in front of his daughter secretly owns 60% of the company, returns 30 days later and fires the CEO. Ethan didn't read the articles. He took Emma out for ice cream instead. She sat on the bench swinging her legs, chocolate on her nose, and said the only thing that mattered to him, "I'm proud of you, Daddy." Smiled, the first real smile in 30 days. "I'm proud of you too, Princess. We make a pretty good team." That night, when Emma finally fell asleep in her own bed, Ethan stood in the doorway watching her for a long time. The cardboard box from the day he was fired still sat in the corner of the living room, unopened. He didn't need it anymore. He already had everything that mattered. The end.